Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. Thomas Miller, Robert Glasscock, taking on your questions. Recently, we dipped into our Discord channel and we asked what some of you would like to ask Robert on the podcast. So, Robert, one that came up that was interesting to me was if somebody, now you got to think about this for a second, if somebody was deficient of a particular element, fire, earth, air, or water, let's say water for this example, if all of a sudden they felt compelled to move to water, let's say to the coast or a lake or by a river, could that be an overcompensation for that lack of the element that they don't have a lot of planets in that element? And then the second part was, would this also extrude to the qualities, cardinal, fixed, and mutable? And then I was wondering, could you take it as far as to angular, succedent, and cadent houses? So we've got quite a bit to at least dip our toe into here, which is of itself a water analogy. So what do you think?
It's a great question, Thomas, and one of the oldest techniques, I guess, that I've always used since I first started out is simply to make a small table. And across the top, you put cardinal, fixed, and mutable. I can't talk. Or CFM, cardinal, fixed, and mutable across the top. And then down the left side, you put fire, earth, air, and water. So my table is just CFM across the top and FEAW down the side, fire, earth, air, water. And then within that table, you put your planets and points, including your ascendant and midheaven. And you can instantly, graphically see what you have a preponderance of. For example, I have 7 planets in cardinal signs. I have 2 planets in fixed signs and 3 planets. Now, when I say planets, I'm talking about points to the ascendant and midheaven. And I have 3 in mutable. Then as far as fire planets, I have 2. Earth planets and points, I have 3. Air planets, I have 5. And water, I have 2. And what you mentioned about overcompensation, I don't know that it's necessarily overcompensation, but it certainly is compensation. One of the things that you can do with yourself when you see that, well, for example, in Liz Green's book on Saturn, Saturn in Gemini, let's say, will tend to have an unconscious feeling that it's not smart enough. I mean, this is very simplistic. And so Saturn in Gemini will often compensate by spending a lot of time in academia or studying or pursuing degrees and so on. And that is a form of compensation for a perceived lack. And the same thing is true with you were mentioning if you lack water. Moving to an environment where you can see water or live near water, or at worst, put an aquarium in your apartment or your house. So there is a lot of truth to this because I'm a Libra anyway, so the goal, I guess, is to become balanced in my life. But this is very much true, I think, with people. But if you set up this table, it gives you a very quick visual reference point for what you have. And then you extruding this to angular, succedent, and cadent is also very instructive.
Okay, I'd like to pick this apart. This is this is so good to pick apart. Okay, so you construct a table, and we really should all do this for our own natal charts, and then we can do it for other people in our lives, or we can do it for other things just to get the visual on this. It's a quick exercise. So you're saying across the top, you put cardinal, fixed, mutable, so C, F, and M, and then you put the elements down the left side, fire, earth, air, water. And then you said you mark points and planets in there. What do you mark for each one of those?
Well, when I have the borders of the table across the top and down the sides, I've got cardinal, fixed, and mutable across the top, fire, earth, air, water down the sides. Then within that table, I simply draw the symbols of the planets and the ascendant and the midheaven.
Oh, okay.
So under cardinal and fire, you might have the moon. And under fixed and fire, you might have Pluto. And under mutable and fire, you may have nothing. And you just keep going down. So cardinal, fixed, and mutable across the top, fire, earth, air, and water down the side. So then under cardinal, you've looked at fire, and in my case, it's just the moon. And then under cardinal and earth, you may have a planet or point, and you put the symbol for that in. So in my case, it's the ascendant in Capricorn, cardinal Earth. So I just put an
Okay.
A.
Okay, perfect. All right. And let me ask you about a couple of the points here, because I know people will be asking. So you said you also include the midheaven and the ascendant.
Yes.
What about the nodes of the moon?
You can, and I do. You absolutely can.
What about the part of fortune?
You can yes, if you use that, absolutely.
And if you use Chiron, which I know you don't, but if somebody did use Chiron, would you include Chiron?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Include Chiron.
And then if somebody had, now's where we branch out, because a lot of people also include other asteroids or fixed stars and other points, vertex point, et cetera, in their chart. Would you stop there, or would you keep going?
It depends on the person. If you want to begin adding asteroids and vertexes and so on, absolutely do it. If you use them, do it. You're going to wind up with a lot of symbols in there, but that's okay. You'll still, what you're really trying to do is graphically depict preponderances and lacks. So at a glance, you can look and see, okay, this guy only has 2 planets in fire, so he lacks fire. This guy has 3 planets in earth and points, and he's got 5 planets in air and only 2 in water. So obviously this person is going to have a preponderance of air, and you can tell that at a glance. Then if you look at down from cardinal, fixed, and mutable, you can see, well, this guy has 7 planets and points, including the ascendant in cardinal, and he only has 2 in fixed and 3 in mutable. So now
always tell him yes.
At a glance, you can see that this chart is preponderantly cardinal and air right off the bat.
Okay. Okay.
Now, you can do that visually, but when you construct this little table, it really makes it instantly apparent.
Okay. Now, let's do this, if you would. Walk us through the chart, and you all get your pencils out, get your pen and paper ready, because would you give us just the snapshot now, just the snippet of each one of these areas? So what if you have a lot of cardinal? What does that mean? What if you have a lot of fixed? Yeah, and just carry that right on through.
If you've got a lot of cardinal signs, these are the signs of initiative and drive and action and leadership, cardinality. So these are people that tend to put their personalities out there right up front, and they can be dynamic people, active people, and they are initiators. They're constantly starting things. Too much cardinality can be incredibly egotistical, for example, but they make good leaders in whatever their areas of interest are. Fixed signs are predominantly the builders. Think Taurus, for example. Rules architects, it rules construction, the builders. So fixed sign people are the ones that make things last. Cardinality is great for starting things. They often have trouble finishing them unless they have fixed signs in their chart. But a predominance of fixed signs, those are the stabilizers and the builders. They make things permanent and lasting and solid and dependable and reliable. The mutable signs are the connectors, the go-betweens, the mediators, the agents, the networkers. So a lot of mutability has a lot of ability to bring people and ideas and projects together and communicate from one element of a project to another element, to another element, to another element. So they're the communicators and the networkers. And then in fire signs, if you have a predominance of fire signs, once again, one of the key words there is initiation. They tend to be inspirational or inspired people. They tend to inspire other people as well. They are full of new ideas. And again, to make those new ideas last, you've got to have some fixity somewhere in the chart or find somebody in your life who can help make them last. But fire signs are very inspirational signs and very intuitive signs. So are the water signs. There's a difference, though, between fire sign intuition and water sign. Water sign intuition is based on feelings, emotional feelings. So the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, are attuned not only to their own feelings, they have an emotional reaction to everything they see and hear. It's an emotional, intuitive reaction. Fire sign people, it's not emotional. It comes in the form of ideas in their heads, in their minds. They're inspired by ideas. Whereas the water sign people are inspired, and water signs tend to be reactive because they encounter a new person or a new situation. They have an instant emotional reaction to that, either a positive emotion or a negative emotion. So if they encounter someone or something that makes them frightened or upset or angry, they're meant to pay attention to that on the water signs. You see the difference? The air sign people tend to live in their thoughts and in their heads and their intellects. The earth sign people tend to live in practicality. They want to see it. Show me, Virgo, the show me sign. Prove it to me. Earth sign people want to see material, physical results. So you can be as airy-fairy and theoretical and metaphysical as you want to be. The earth signs want to know, okay, how does that help me make a living? How does it help me put food on the table? And so the earth signs tend to be oriented toward practicality, and they're also the ones that express everything through materiality. So they can be incredibly gifted artists and painters. They're creating tangible, physical, material images or products that contain a lot of artistic and creative self-worth. Or the earth signs can also be, as I mentioned, architects and builders. So they're creating structures, physical structures to house people and house businesses and so on, or the roads that allow us to travel. So they physicalize everything. And this gets down into learning types even, Thomas. You have basically auditory, visual learners, and kinetic learners. So a kinetic learner is a person, for example, when the teacher hands out the test results, they'll take that test and hold it in their hands and look at it and find maybe crumple it up. They'll do something physical with it because they're kinetic. And these are learning types as well. You have random and rote learners. So within those three learning types, a teacher who is all over the blackboard and is very exciting and this idea and they're putting it up on the back, that teaching style will appeal to visual kinetic learners. Auditory learners and rote learners learn by sound. So the teacher can say, all right, here's point A, here's point B. This is rote learning. Random learning is, here's point A, and look, it connects to point Z over here. They jump around, and some learners respond very well to that. I happen to be one of those. So you've got several learning types that you can absolutely read from this preponderance of elements and qualities in the chart, too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally it does. And great explanation. And folks, you just got a good free seminar right there. That was excellent. One other thing that I wanted to ask is, what if people are imbalanced in one of the areas instead of tilting one direction or the other? What if they are pretty well spread out?
That's rare. It's rare, but it's wonderful. You will always have a predominance of one kind or another. Everybody does. But it may really be a fairly symmetrical chart. Everybody wonders when they're starting out, well, I have empty houses. They don't have anything in them. What does that mean? Well, you have to have empty houses. There are only 10 planets and sun, moon, and so on, and 12 houses. So you're always going to have empty planets as a rule. And just like you were mentioning earlier about overcompensation or compensating, when you have an empty house, it's not that those house matters are empty in your life. It's simply that you take the sign on the cusp of the empty house and the ruler of that sign, and that planetary ruler of that empty house will show you how that person handles those house matters, depending on where that planet. For example, let me think a minute. I don't necessarily go into my chart, but just for an example, I happen to have an empty second house, well, it doesn't mean I don't make any money, but I have Aquarius on my empty second house. So my belief systems about money are very Aquarian. How do I earn a living? Astrology, Aquarius. How did I also earn a living? Television, Aquarius, Uranus. And it's like compensation when you mentioned that earlier. If you have an empty house, let's say, you may compensate for that empty house by paying particular attention, even unconsciously, to where the planetary ruler of that house is. So I have an empty second house. It's Aquarius, so it's ruled by Saturn and Uranus. Well, Uranus is in Gemini in my sixth house. And how do I make a living? Again, the sixth house of work and occupation. Gemini, multiple careers, because it's Gemini, a double sign. It's in the sign of writing and communications. So that way you can begin to look at empty houses and get more clues as to what that house is really all about by where that ruler is placed and the sign it's placed in, its aspects, and so on. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's a way to begin to approach a chart. And don't be afraid of empty houses. It simply means that those house matters are subordinate to some other house. But nonetheless, it's interesting to me to look at the balances, the preponderances, and so on of cardinal, fixed, mutable, and fire, earth, air, and water. Now, because sometimes a person's sun sign will be in a sign that may be the only planet they have in that quality. You see, in that element, rather.
Does that tilt the scale any?
Well, no, it's just that, for example, if you have the sun in a water sign, and then that's the only planet you have in water, people would say, well, I'm born a Scorpio, so I'm a water sign. But in fact, you may have a preponderance in air or fire, which means the sun, even though it's the life force, is perhaps not the strongest element in the chart. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In my chart, it does work out that way. I have 5 planets in air, and I am an air sign. I'm a Libra. But in your case, and you've got several planets in water too. So you're being a Scorpio, you will still have this water preponderance. But it could have been the situation where maybe only your sun was in Scorpio, and then you had a lot of other planets in air or fire or earth, in which case your nature would be a preponderance of whatever that element is that predominates. And it can be different than what the sun sign is, which only simply it gives you a little more depth about how to read it.
Well, there's a lot that we could go into this. What a great question. And thank you for that very excellent thing that we can all use, first of all, to look at our own charts, and then the great explanations. Really appreciate it. That was great. And that question came from our Discord channel, which we have. Kristen Lawhead has been running that for us for over a year now, I think. Been doing a great job with that. And it's where the conversation continues. So it's kind of like ping pong, where you serve and then you get the volley going and the conversation keeps going. And that's on our Discord channel. The quickest way to get there is to go to funastrology.com up at the top. Click on the Discord link there, and it will take you to the channel. You can get right in. And obviously, if you'd like to talk to Robert about a reading and you'd like to look at your elements and your qualities and many other things in your chart, that information is in our show notes. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast with Robert Glasscock.